We're back here, Singapore, BlockShow, Asia 2019. I can't tell you the stuff going on. Right now, we've got Roland here, and we were just talking off camera about the opportunity. The opportunity if you're 14 years old, 12 years old, if you're an old guard, if you're a new guard with experience in the old community, you should be here talking about how we're going to transform this landscape in the next 20 to 30 years. Roland, so glad that you are with me right now at BlockShow Singapore. Can you please say hello to the D-Live community?
Hi D-Live community, and thank you so much BlockShow for having me at this amazing conference in Singapore.
Okay.
Really happy to be here.
Okay, good. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you. Can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Sure, I am part of the old guard. And this is what makes this conference and this subject of blockchain and cryptocurrency so interesting. Right. So as part of this old guard industry, I was a corporate lawyer. And specifically what I did was fundraising for my clients. And that's whether taking a company to go IPO or helping some private equity companies with their fundraising structure.
Okay.
And the M&A mergers and acquisition piece.
Right.
So basically dealing with finance in the traditional way with companies. And the reason I shifted into venture capital is not to say that I'm shifting industries or doing something entirely different, but it was just taking that skill set and that experience and moving it to the earlier part of company building to see it from the venture level, see how it builds up.
So does that allow you a little bit more flexibility that you're not approaching the old, so you don't have those specific boxes that need to be checked for this new world? Because when you look at the institutional investment for the old, there's certain boxes that have to the time around, which are certain checks, right?
Yeah.
Are you looking at this in a new through new lenses? And if so, can you explain what that looks like?
Sure. So it's a bit of both. So I currently am the managing partner of a venture capital fund called CoCoon Ignite Ventures. Okay. And so we started off investing in 2015, and we were doing it in a very traditional way. And traditional in the sense that we're applying the very similar thinking and frameworks that we'll apply to late stage companies to look at early stage. The rationale being that if we understand what will happen later on in the company in terms of its financing growth, you can kind of prepare for that of things to come early on. So you bring that experience earlier on so you can better prep companies to do that. What I think is most interesting now with blockchain projects and crypto projects is the discussion has been a lot about how much can we borrow from the existing framework of looking at companies, whether it's venture or late stage, but using that traditional logic and framework to understand how a company grows and how much of that can we apply to these blockchain projects and crypto projects.
Is it a lot?
There are some. Okay. So, in the great panel discussions we had at BlockShow so far, there's a lot of talk between, does it really matter, at least right now, 2019, to look at profits and earnings and revenues for blockchain projects?
I venture to say, I'm curious about yours, but I'd venture to just shoot my mouth off right now and say no. I think we're looking at ROI in 10 years, 20, but the ROI at that point.
Right.
When you are a cog of, let's just say, Bank of America 20 years ago, and that little, your basis points really will add up and to make you ripe for acquisition as well. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little far-fetched, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well.
Sure, and this is where I think it gets very interesting for a lot of us on the investment side, precisely because we don't know what's to come. And in many ways, our job is to tell the future. But in order to do that, where we borrow a bit from in terms of the old guard industry are, the fundamentals of at least what keeps a company running, what keeps the lights on.
Right.
So you will need to fundraise one way or another. You need to find customers one way or another. But then in terms of fundraising, for example, where it starts to change, where it starts to be different is maybe in the old traditional industries where they do emphasize on earnings and revenues and all that established principles for a ongoing business. Now it's the vision, what could this do, what could this transform? And we back that up with research. Both research on the technology, what can it actually do? Is it realistic if executed well that they can transform the way you explain it?
Exactly.
Or is it that we are modernizing, upgrading existing things, technologies or processes, through blockchain or through tokens, to essentially do the same thing but better, cheaper, and faster. And those are kind of general ways to hopefully better predict things to come.
So what's your sweet spot, the sector is your sweet spot for the growth leveraging blockchain technology?
So we invest a lot nowadays in what I call the boring stuff. And it just so happens from our view that the boring stuff, which I'll explain a bit more what they are, coincides nicely or converges nicely with blockchain technologies.
Okay.
Boring stuff essentially are things, people generally call them enterprise solutions, but stuff that happens in the back.
SaaS, right? Okay.
Stuff that we just take for granted, but I often say these kind of technologies does 99% of the hard work.
Absolutely.
So when we come in, individuals come in and use it, the 1% is very easy. That makes it a great product.
Right.
So in terms of that enterprise SaaS and the boring stuff, because it is dealing with businesses, and businesses do deal with a lot of individuals and a lot of information, important information, the element of security, of transparency, of flow, all that, all of a sudden fits very nicely with what some blockchain projects are proposing that they're doing.
Okay.
So we've invested in the more traditional sense in equities in these kind of companies, but not to say that we'll have to switch to a new investment strategy to do a blockchain investment, but we eventually see these technologies going into the companies we've already invested in.
Got it.
Because they naturally have to
completely
improve their infrastructure and
that's fantastic.
tech offering.
All right. So those are the boring, you said you were going to talk about, those are the boring.
The boring things. Yep.
What are the exciting ones personally?
Yep.
What's exciting for you personally to just see, to walk around the show and at the conference? What's exciting this blockchain based for you personally?
I think, speaking from a consumer level, and excitement always often comes from consumer user experience, because we can discuss it among friends. There's a lot of bonding around that experience. So what I see out in this conference is all stuff transactions, the wallets, the ability to interact and buy things and move value around. Not necessarily money, but value, information.
Exactly.
Money obviously is part of it, but then that creates this very dynamic situation, as we saw in e-commerce. But now it's supposed to be more frictionless. It's supposed to be more borderless and more trustworthy. I think that's very exciting.
Okay. I'm sorry, we're geeking out here. Yeah, it is. Frictionless payments kind of turns us on.
Where you trust one another.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you trust one another.
So what do you see, what are challenges? Now let's talk about the challenges to investment strategy dealing with blockchain companies, entrepreneurs, technology in and of itself. What are some of the challenges you've come across, and how did you basically get over those challenges?
So the easier part of that question is the entrepreneur side, because we can borrow a lot from the more traditional venture capital mindset about great founders, dedicated founders, have a good understanding of what they're doing, vision, all that vision, mission, that kind of stuff. Where it gets very difficult, I think for all of us here, is because we're trying to predict the future, because we're trying to have this crystal ball. The blockchain technologies, I think, are so disruptive and so impactful that it goes beyond just industry. Now we're having governments and politics get involved in this. And so the challenges is the uncertainty in terms of what laws and regulations and political
the unknown unknowns.
The unknown unknowns, but these political things, the geopolitical things that will come into play that we have not much control or visibility over. And that lack of visibility makes it very challenging to know what will be great and what will not be great.
So hopefully these consortiums and the alliances and the coalitions that are being built with some of the bigger names, working with the governments, will actually come into play a lot more in the next year. Because I see it really taking root right now. And again, we spoke about 2 years ago, and I'd love to hear what you've seen. 2 years ago from we will, and we're going to, and all of these great things, to weeding out, to we have, here's what happens, and unfortunately, here are the results. Are you seeing a lot more of that as well with the companies that you're dealing with?
We are. I mean, just to put it in context, it's still early stages. So 2 years ago was a lot of promises, a lot of ideas. And given the 24 months, we've seen some great execution. So those fundamentals haven't changed. The teams that painted a very rosy picture, and the ones who really focused down on executing as opposed to other things, PR or elsewhere, have delivered a glimpse into what their solutions provide. Now I say a glimpse because I don't think it's fully scaled out, it's not fully adopted, but it should not be discredited to say that because it hasn't been fully adopted, it's not going to work. It's because I think with everything that blockchain touches, the impact is scalable and therefore affects a lot of businesses and population. It's just that you have to have that really clear certainty that the tech works, that what you're promising works. So compared to 2 years ago, we're seeing some results now. Some great payment projects, already being used among small communities, businesses.
Emerging tech, right?
In emerging tech, absolutely. Established businesses borrowing, some blockchain technologies within their own operations, testing it, inside their own kind of sandbox, inside their own silo. So that demonstrates that people have been executing, and with also new protocols coming out, that people are also thinking in a bit more detail. Well, what's best fit? What's the best solution for some of these problems? It's not always an an Ethereum protocol or necessarily Bitcoin protocol. There'll be other. The industry is growing. It's being built out, and it can only do so because the execution is also following with, and so you're building on top of that. So I think it's early days, but continuing.
How do you keep up with the education yourself personally? How do you keep up with this?
Yeah,
I know what we have to do here.
Right.
So how do you keep up on a day-to-day with everything happening going on in this world?
Yeah. Well, really not trying to plug anything here, but being in a conference like this,
thank you,
and just being very efficiently gathering a lot of smart people and smart projects is a very good way.
Okay.
And in between these conferences, I think a lot of preparation work by talking to various kind of news aggregators who are very focused on the blockchain crypto space. Just having that habit of waking up instead of reading the news, your daily news, you also have your kind of channels to go to.
Okay.
And once you've done that kind of homework, when you come to these kind of conferences, you kind of want to download some of that knowledge or share some of that knowledge and get a feedback.
Yes.
Get a temperature check about, hey, I read about this, but you might be in the game, you're doing this project, what do you see?
Exactly.
And I think that is, probably the best holistic way of taking theory and literature and bringing it offline to where you actually talk human to human and get a much better understanding of the execution piece of the reality on the ground situation on some of these projects.
So there's two things. One, what's next for you, right? When we sit down in a year, what can I expect to hear? What companies, not specifically the companies, but what projects, the initiatives overall, do you think will come to fruition under your belt? And again, what you're going to be excited to talk about in the next year?
Yeah, I will look at it from the context of our existing portfolio. Given that we invested, we didn't focus on the blockchains piece, but we do see that technology getting into our portfolio companies, or our portfolio companies adopting a lot of these technologies. One of the biggest issues that we care about, because a lot of our companies deal with so much data, it is data privacy.
Right.
And the solutions that we're seeing around, including some of the solutions here at this conference, is really trying to solve some of that problems. So I want to see the adoption, the really full-scale adoption, and bringing the data rights back to the individual, back to the businesses, and so and changing the rhetoric so that we're no longer focused so much on hacks and all the dark side of technology, but saying that we learned a lot from that, and now we have a positive solution. In my case, specifically on consumer data protection.
A quick question: we spoke about machine learning. AI, how is that in your day-to-day business involved? Is it more, are you just looking at, or do you have actual implementation of any machine learning or AI into your investment protocols? Yeah,
I see the machine learning, the AI as running in parallel with blockchain technologies. So we need kind of various technology stacks in these new data-driven companies for them to function efficiently. So when it comes to AI and ML and machine learning and deep learning, that exercise we started, since we invested on day one. And so the way what that means is, it's very important to first ask what data you want to collect, so you're very clear and precise on clean data, on top of which you can then start building learning algorithms. And so it takes time, and time must do the work for it. So where we are now, 3 to 4 years into our portfolio, we're now starting to see the fruition for some of these algos bring out intelligence that we could not possibly have had 2 years ago.
Okay, all right. So if there's anything that you would like to tell the BlockShow, Cointelegraph, DLive community, give them a point of advice or ask of them something for your company, what would you like to tell the world at your fingertips right now?
So there are cycles in any new innovation, but directionally, having gone to many conferences and also being at BlockShow, seeing how amazing this conference is, directionally as an investor, I am behind blockchain technologies. So keep up the hard work. Now, in keeping up with the hard work, also don't forget that there's still the real world. There's still people that need to use the technology. So very much focus on when we can go to market with a lot of your solutions and work with your customers and work with your investors to ensure that once you go to market, you're sustainable, you scale, and you become a great business at the end of the day.
That's fantastic words. How can they follow you, catch up with you, find everything about what is happening with the company? They may have some great ideas they want to bring to you. How can they do that?
Sure. So our website, cocooningniteventures.com, has a click there to contact us, all our partners directly. You can also see our portfolio there, so that's probably the best one-stop shop to start the conversation with us.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us that information, advice, and having you sit down.
Thank you. It's a
All right,
pleasure.
take care. It's a pleasure too.
Thank you.
Man.